Okay, so welcome to our third session of day one of our Tridion Sites 10 Bootcamp. I'm going to start off just touching on some of the changes in content delivery, and then my colleagues Andrzej Zitko and Natalia Aplinyenko will talk about some changes in the CM side. So first up, something we've spent quite a lot of effort on in recent years, actually, not just this last release. It's the content delivery caching solution. So in the past, we had a cache solution that was hand-built cache system. So we managed all the memory management ourselves and worked out the size of objects and such like. And there was quite a complicated dependency management system, invalidation system in place. So essentially every item within the cache, we knew where there were dependencies to all the various elements within the data there. And whenever you had to validate one of those entities, we had to calculate where those dependencies were at the content service side. So it was quite an overhead to do that. And it actually made it quite hard to monitor and debug as well when there were issues with it. And we had a bit of a spike in 2021 with some issues on that. So we already had ideas in our mind to improve this, but this kind of accelerated that a little bit. And in the same time, during this time, obviously customers have ever greater demands for greater performance from our delivery services, in particular the content service. And we're having a lot of customers, very high volumes of retrieval or large volumes of data that they need to pull in one go in some cases. Like some customers actually use our content service as a sort of an interim API and then pull it all onto some kind of file system like delivery now at the front end. So all these things required a good performing cache sitting in the middle, either for subsequent hits or even just for the first time pulling through the data system. So we needed to make sure that whatever solution we came up with would meet these needs. So our main requirement was that whatever we choose was going to be standards based. We didn't want to have any sort of handcrafted cache solutions in the system, simply because that means that the sort of the heavy lifting of the memory management and scaling piece could be handled by those third-party standards-based cache providers. And we would then just focus on providing a very sort of sleek cache implementation. And what we chose in the end was to use a fairly simple timestamp design. So it means we no longer need these somewhat complicated dependency calculation pieces. We can do it instead using this timestamp design that we have instead, which provides sort of fast stale check. It also means we actually now have a TTL on our items in the cache. It is configurable. So you can essentially say that, our standard out of the box timestamp, every item will be invalidated within that standard TTL. Whereas before, items could just persist in there between reboots, not between reboots, up until a reboot. As I said before, we want to rely on a third party to handle the memory management and the scaling needs. And also that gives us some flexibility in terms of deployment. So most of these solutions have various ways of deploying these solutions, whether that's embedded, which is how we've chosen to deploy this, or as a sort of a partition replicated, which means whether the data sits between nodes or whether it's shared between nodes. And finally, whether you have a distributed setup, which that could include a standalone cache instance as well. One of the things we did as part of this, we updated our Java database connection pool mechanism. So we're using a fairly old implementation of that, and we switched to Hikari, which is generally regarded as one of the fastest of the connection pools. And that switch alone actually gave us some really quite significant performance improvements on the uncached nature and behavior of our services, and the caching on top of it has only added to the benefits we've seen. So really briefly, the architecture of this looks a bit like this. So we have this cache that essentially sits within our deployer and within our content service. We no longer have JMS, which you notice here in this diagram. So previously we would use JMS for invalidation messages. The deployer would send those invalidation messages to GMS, and then the content services would listen out for those messages. The beauty of using Apache Ignite, which is our chosen cache provider, is that it has its own mechanism for invalidation within its own cluster. So the way we deploy it is we actually have an Ignite cluster within these services that acts like a kind of a lightweight node, if you like, within the services. And in this case, we've configured the content services to be the main two replicated nodes within this Apache cluster. So the deployer still acts as part of that cluster, but it's not doing any compute in terms of storing data. That's all handled in the content service. So in terms of how the deployment was before, where the content services have most of the data cached, it's similar to how we have it set up here. So it's broadly the same in terms of memory use. There's a small overhead in terms of the Ignite overhead within the service, but it's quite small compared to the size of the cache that you typically have within them. And the benefit this gives you is that we can use Ignite's own clustering mechanism. We don't have to implement our own. We don't have to have any kind of queue. And you can then remove nodes to this cluster on the fly, and Ignite will automatically balance those things together. So the big benefit this has compared to the old cache is that if we add another content service to this, that new node will get populated automatically by Ignite as a replicated cache across those nodes. So it means that you no longer have this situation where on a cloud deployment, for instance, that if the content service was recycled, you have this warm-up time where the cache has to repopulate on that particular node, because now it's populated really swiftly between those Ignite nodes in the cluster, and it's pretty much available virtually straight away. If the data's not in the node, it will pull it from one of the other nodes within the Ignite cluster on the fly, and then it's not repopulating it from the database, just from the cache. As I said before, this does give us the flexibility as well. You could imagine if you wanted a standalone Ignite cluster, you could sit it in here as well, and that would give you that option. But out of the box, this is how we're providing the services. In terms of configuration, there's not a lot great to it. So we have two configuration points. So in our application properties, you can obviously see this is the JCache implementation. It tells you the JCache provider, and then we just pointed to a configuration file. The only other thing we include in here is the ability to blanket disable various parts of the cache. So we have a cache for what this is the content service cache. We also have a legacy cache regions, if you like, for the old CIS regions. So we moved all the CIS caching into this layer as well. They're available as well. So if you're still using that, you can also configure them. So we allow you to disable these at a sort of a high level. All the other configuration with past responsibility to Apache Ignite's own configuration. Rather than duplicating it all, it's much more flexible if it just sits within here. So I'm putting a small sample there, just illustrating how the Ignite nodes talk to each other. So clearly these things need to be able to find each other. So when you add a new node into this system, it needs to find the other nodes within it. So there's various ways Ignite allows you to do that. You can use multicast. That doesn't always work in a lot of network environments, or it might end up picking up things that you don't want it to pick up. So in the end, we decided that we would use a connection back to the broker database, because both the deployer and the content service have access to that broker database. And you can have Ignite simply talk to that database, and it will store those node details within it whenever they register for it. And eventually they will, if you take one of those nodes away, that data will disappear from the database after a sort of configured timeout. So this is how you configure it. There's a few more configuration options I'm not showing you here, but it means that you can tune the Ignite installation quite elegantly. So that's the cache stuff. It was quite a big investment for the team. It might not look like particularly interesting business feature, but from a performance perspective, it's really interesting for us, and also makes it much more flexible and maintainable for the future. I'm going to hand over to Natalia now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I will be sharing my screen. Okay, I'm Natalia Napriyenko. I'm a product owner in Tridion sites, and today I'm going to talk about what new features and improvements we have introduced into access management. First of all, I would like to give a quick overview what is Tridion access management for those who does not yet know. So basically, access management is the service, and it's a security service that used to secure Tridion sites application. So it simplifies a way of single sign-on by using a single authentication protocol, OpenID Connect, while on the top, when connecting to external, it's basically using all different protocols. So on this schema, you can see, so in the middle, access management, underneath all the Tridion sites application that are secured with access management, and all Tridion sites application basically talking to access management using OpenID Connect. Whenever in access management, on top, access management can connect to external IDPs using different protocols like LDAP, Windows Authentication, SAML, or OpenID Connect. So basically, when you set it up, you can configure different identity providers, external providers with all these supported protocols. Okay, starting with the first topic and the security changes. In Tridion Sites 10, we are making access management to be a mandatory component to be installed. Specifically, access management is required for experience space, and this is due to, again, security changes and introducing backend for front-end API in experience space, which are only compatible with OpenID Connect. This also means that direct Windows authentication is not supported anymore with experience space. It does not mean that you cannot use Windows authentication, so you can still continue using Windows authentication, but you can do it now through the access management. So in access management, you just will need to create a Windows identity provider. Next changes, we also drop in support for legacy authentication configurations in Tridion Sites 10. They are SAML, single sign-on SiteMinder, and single sign-on Tivoli. So basically, all these configurations will not be supported anymore in Tridion Sites 10. If you are using SAML configuration in old way, you have to migrate it into access management as identity provider. SSO can also be migrated, but in case if your SSO provider supports SAML or OpenID Connect, so basically the protocols that access management supports. Moving to the next slide and following up on topic where you cannot use any more direct Windows authentication. So we improved access management. Now with access management, if before, in order to use Windows authentication, you had to install access management in iOS as iOS web application. Now with Tridion Sites, we also added support of Windows authentication if access management is installed as Windows service. So both ways, of course, still iOS and Windows service, both ways of installing still supported, and of course it depends on preferences or rules of the customers. But for Tridion Sites, we would still recommend to now install Access Manager as a Windows service. And yeah, if you need Windows authentication, you can just create Windows identity provider there. The next major feature that we added into Access Management, it's basically Access Management now supports custom applications. So you can now create, if let's say before Sites 10, Access Management was restricted only to Tridion Sites application. I basically had just hard-coded all these Tridion Sites applications. With Sites 10, you can now register a custom application. So you can register custom application and also control access for users to your custom applications through setting up the access control settings. Next to it, if your custom application needs to perform service-to-service communication, for example, without user iteration, right? So your API will your custom application API would need to talk to core service REST, you can also create a service account for that and also give access to certain applications. In addition to ability to register custom applications, we also will be providing access management client library. So what is this? So basically, when you develop your custom application, you can use this client library to implement authentication for users. Users would use same authentication or login flow as for any other Tridion sites applications. This client library will be supported only by custom applications developed in Net 6.0. The best practice that we would recommend to develop your custom applications, basically develop backend and front end. And backend is Net 6, and there you can use our access management client library, which basically will handle all the authentication flow if users would log into your custom application. Okay, now short demo. How you can register your custom application in access management. So this is access management. You just go to applications. By default, you would see all Tridion sites applications here. You click register application. By default, we provide a client ID already for it, but you can change it to your client ID. Specify the name. That's how it will be shown in access management. Then you need to choose what authentication flow type your application will support. There are 3 types available. Authorization code with PKCE, it's the most secure way, most secure type of authentication. There are 2 others. They are less secure. So if you're using our access management client libraries that already implements the most secure type of authentication, and you need to provide a sign-in endpoint. So normally it would be something like this. So it's basically the endpoint where users will be redirected. The endpoint of your custom application after login user would be redirected to it. And just save. So once you implemented your custom application and register it in this way, you can now go to basically and give appropriate and edit the access settings. So your custom application will appear here, and you will also enable or disable access to your custom application for certain group of users. Same if let's say your custom application does not require user iteration, right? It does not require a login, but you just need to talk to API from your API to core service REST or core service API. You can just register a service account for it. It already provides some ID. We can leave it. And also select the roles you wanna give it, right? Example. And it will create your client ID, so that you can use, and you can generate a client secret. So with this client ID, client secret, from your custom application, you can get access token through the access management and use that access token to communicate to API. That's how it looks like. You can also, if you don't need, if you stop using, custom application, you can also basically delete it. But here you need to make sure that it's not used. That's why we show you confirmation checkbox. So that will be deleted. That was about custom application. So moving on to the next feature. Another feature that we improved in access management. So we basically introduced automatic sign-in key management. What is this? Before on Sites 10, so access management, when you log in, access management is issuing token. That token normally should be signed. To sign the token, before you would need to configure a certificate. So you can see on the left how the previous configuration looked like. So you had to configure a sign-in certificate, and when you need to update it, you basically need to obtain new certificate and then do all the rotation manually. Put first in validation, then after some time put it in sign-in, and remove the old certificate. So that was completely manual process before. With Sites 10, this process is automatic, so you don't need to obtain certificate anymore. You don't need to rotate or remove old. That's completely handled by access management. However, there is one case when you still need to configure certificate, and it's when you are using SAML identity provider. For SAML identity provider, access management still requires certificate, but that's only when it communicates to SAML provider and not to sign token anymore. Yeah, so if you're using SAML provider, you just need to configure one certificate. You don't need to rotate it, and that needs to be done in the sign-in section. Okay, and the next feature, I'm moving on. This feature will be useful for our partners who is provisioning and hosting Tridion sites for our customers. With Sites 10 in access management, we introduced predefined bootstrap data, also bootstrapping mechanism. So basically, it allows you to quickly and consistently set up access management with already predefined data. So there is a bootstrapping mechanism, also bootstrap files. Bootstrap files, just JSON files. And these JSON files contains pre-configured or predefined data for the environment, like a definition of application roles or service accounts. So by default, access management already come with predefined data for Tridion sites application. And in addition to it, you can, of course, create your custom bootstrap file where you can extend access management with additional custom data. One of the cases when you might do it, it's, for example, by default, access management does not provide any predefined identity provider. So if you have already configuration up front of identity provider, you would like to create into access management, so you can use this bootstrapping mechanism to pre-install access management with already a predefined identity provider. But you need to know upfront all the configuration for identity provider. In general, not just identity provider, any custom data, any custom, and basically that entities that access management support can be put into custom bootstrap file and provision access management with that. Here you can see the piece at the bottom piece of configuration from the access management configuration file. This is a bootstrap. So that's where you define all the modules, predefined modules. So by default, it comes with access management add-on service and site CM. If you need to add some custom configuration to it, please put it into separate configuration file and don't change the default configuration. So you can see it like this custom where module is actually just a JSON file. Okay, that was for access management. And next feature I would like to talk, it's related to content manager and a new publication right, which is log management rights that we introduce in Tridion Sites 10. So what is log management write? So it's basically write on publication. This writes allows you to resolve logs on items that are logged or checked out by another user without being system administrator. What that means, example, if there are some editors, authors who started working on content and left it checked out, so nobody else could continue on it, right? So they before they would go to system administrator and ask to unlock those items. Now with this right, you can check in or undo check out items that are logged by other users. So either, if you are fine with the changes, you can do check in. If you don't like, you can undo check out and just continue editing these items. I think that's pretty much was my part of the presentation. And for the next presentation, I would like to hand over to Andrei.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Natalia. Presentation view. Okay. So for the people who don't know me, I'm Andrei Zhitko. I'm product owner for Tridion Sites product line. And I would like to thank you for joining us today on our bootcamp session. A bit of context about area I am going to talk about. So Tridion add-on service is our default extensibility mechanism for Tridion Sites product. We do have various extensions and connectors available for the product, as well as you can develop your own. So this release decided to improve usability and auditing for it. So we added possibility to enable and disable the package, as well as in terms of auditing, we do store user information who uploaded or updated the package or its configuration. One of the main topics for this release is extensibility and experience space. For this, we do have a new extension point that is type experience space extension. From the properties, it has the main properties is files, and it does support wildcards. So you can group your files by file extension, for example. And I do encourage you to join tomorrow's session that is fully related and discovering experience-based extensibility. So do join that session. It will cover pretty much this topic. So let's move to the a bit more interesting part. So to the demo. I hope I prayed enough to demo Gods and it will work. So I do have a system with a new experience space and add-on service. So what I'm going to do, I will upload a package. So it's actually a connector, the YouTube connector. Yeah, so as you can see, we do store information about the user who uploaded the package or updated if it will be updated later. So this connector requires configuration to be uploaded as well. So let's upload that as well. And as you can see, we do store information about user who uploaded the configuration file.
Let's give a couple of more moments for system to synchronize the data. So I'll just reload and see if it got all the data already or not. Okay, so as you can see, I do have my YouTube connector. I can navigate, browse, and do whatever I need with that content in that connector. So let's get back to the Tridion service itself and explore a possibility to enable, disable the packages. Actually, we do have at least one that is disabled. Let's just disable the connector that we just uploaded. So this disabled. Again, let's give it a couple of moments to synchronize between Tridion service and the content management itself. So I'll just reload and see if it's got the information. Yes, so as you can see, my YouTube connector is not available in the system anymore. So it might be useful for debugging purposes of the new versions of the packages, or for troubleshooting or recovery purposes in case some of the packages break your system and you could just disable some of them. Let's just enable it and have YouTube available for our system. Again, let's refresh. Not fast enough to reload. Okay, so I again have my YouTube. So that's part is done for the demo. Let's move a bit further and talk about the next area. So our recipe that was initially introduced in previous version, that is Tridion Sites 9.6. So let's take a look what has been changed. Let's see if I can get this nice laser ink. Okay, so as you can see, we do have a new method for a binaries controller that is powering, enabling multiple file upload feature and experience space that you will see later today during the presentation. And that feature, as it was already announced a bit earlier today and discussed, is deprecating WebDAV protocol that is in most cases was used just to upload multiple binaries to the system. We do have a couple of batch operation methods that powers a workflow feature for experience space that you will see again later today during the presentation. A couple of the methods to get users and groups. Method to get locked items, either versioned or organizational. So it's a replacement for a method that we had in previous release for checkout item list. It was returning only versioned items. So it's a new one and replacement for that. Method to get paged list. Something that was asked some, let's say, a lot in community. So the route for cross-system search was changed. However, from functional point of view, it behaves the same. We do have new controller settings. This part that does provide methods to operate with authenticated user settings or application settings. And last but not least, a couple of new workflow methods that enhance workflow feature in the system. With this, let's move on to deprecated methods. So I don't need other point anymore. So application data is deprecated. It is replaced with settings controller methods that do provide structured way of creating and saving data in a structured manner and with a safe way of accessing that data. Extensions method is used by experience-based extensibility feature to get list of extensions, and we don't see use cases for customers to use that method, and that's why it will be moved to the internal API, as I call it, backend for frontend in next release. And as I already said, checkout item list is replaced with locked items that provides possibility to get list of versioned and organizational items. Let's move on. And so those this area was already a bit shared today with custom application features that Natalia did present. So where we do recommend to use backend and frontend for your custom applications if you want. But in case you would like to use direct HTTP calls to our REST API from your web application, you will need to deal with course policy. That's why we did implement course support for our REST API, and it gives you a possibility to integrate it into your custom dashboards, or maybe integrate with Jira, Confluence, or your custom applications like blogs, for example, or bots. And it's worth to mention that this idea was asked of the community as well. So let's switch to the demo. Again, my system. As you can see, I do have some list of publications, and I do have a Confluence page that has some basic JavaScript that allows me to handle HTTP requests to our REST API. So less talking, more demo. So I'll just click a button to get the list of publications that I do have here as well. And just as a simple one as well, I can create some content directly from Confluence. So for example, this is a bundle. Name it even like my yeah, let's see the pick folder for that. Yeah, let's use this one. So it's, as you can see, it's empty. So just copy the location. And click on create button. Yeah, I guess I missed. At least we do have some error handling, which is good. I missed that part. It's saying that it's folder. So it says that item is created. Let's take a look. And indeed, I do have my bundle, and I can use it if I need. I also would like to just share configuration file. So the default location for that will be your default installation location, Open API, and services. By default, course is disabled. So this section that enables course is disabled. It's up to you to make decision if you would like to enable that or not. You can add, so you need to add your domains that from which you're allowing to access your REST API, and you can add as many as you want, but just adding more nodes here. Is this? I am switching back to the presentation. So with this, it concludes our bootcamp session.